April 18th, 1942. Over the East China Sea, 15,000 feet above open water. The engine vibration hums through Lieutenant Saburo Sakai's Zero fighter like a living thing. Oil pressure steady, fuel mixture perfect. The sky ahead is a pale, empty blue, the kind that usually means an easy kill. Then the radio crackles. Enemy aircraft bearing 300. Sakai leans forward, eyes narrowing behind his goggles. He spots them moments later. Unfamiliar silhouettes, twin-engined, flying higher than expected. American bombers, bold, slow, clumsy. Or so he believes. He smiles. The Mitsubishi A6M0 has taught him a simple truth since the first months of the war. Hit them once, and they burn. British, Dutch, Chinese, even the first American fighters in the Philippines, all turned into falling torches after a short burst of cannon fire. Fuel tanks explode, wings peel back, pilots never get out. Sakai pushes the throttle forward and closes the distance. He has no idea that this assumption, shared by nearly every Japanese naval aviator, is about to become dangerously outdated. Section 1. The laughing assumption. The Zero dives cleanly, its lightweight frame slicing through the air. Sakai lines up his shot and squeezes the trigger. Tracers streak forward and tear into the bomber's wing root. He expects flame. Instead, nothing. The aircraft lurches, staggers, but keeps flying. Sakai frowns. He fires again, walking rounds along the fuselage. Metal sparks, smoke puffs, but no fireball, no sudden disintegration. The bomber holds formation. What? Behind him, other Japanese pilots report the same thing. Hits that should have ignited fuel simply don't. One American aircraft even turns toward them, its gunners opening fire with calm precision. This isn't how it's supposed to work. For months, Japanese pilots have joked about American aircraft design. Too heavy, too complicated, too cautious. Engineers afraid of weight, they say. Pilots hiding behind armor. Japanese doctrine has always favored performance over protection. Speed, maneuverability, offensive spirit. The Zero embodies it perfectly. No armor plate behind the pilot, no bullet-resistant glass, no protection around the fuel tanks. Why waste weight on a pilot who should never be hit? Why shield fuel if the enemy will be dead first? The answer seems obvious, until American planes start absorbing damage and flying home. In the United States, this reality has been forming quietly since before Pearl Harbor. As early as the late 1930s, American aircraft designers face a grim lesson from Europe. Planes are not being lost to engine failure or poor flying. They are being lost to fire. A single bullet through a fuel tank can turn a combat aircraft into a funeral pyre. So American engineers pursue an unglamorous solution. No speed advantage, no increased firepower, just survival. They develop self-sealing fuel tanks. The concept is deceptively simple. Layers of rubberized material surround the fuel bladder. When a bullet penetrates the tank, fuel leaks briefly. Then the rubber swells on contact with gasoline, sealing the hole. No explosion, no spreading flame. Just damage and a chance to live. By 1941, most American frontline aircraft, including the P-40 Warhawk, F-4F Wildcat, and B-17 Flying Fortress, are flying with these tanks installed. Japanese intelligence notices. They dismiss it. Back in the Pacific skies, Sakai presses his attack, frustration creeping in. He finally sees flame, but it is small, contained. A brief flicker that dies out almost immediately. The bomber limps away, trailing smoke but still alive. That plane should have burned, he mutters. What Sakai doesn't know is that inside the wing, the bullet hole has already sealed itself. The fuel leak has stopped. The fire starved and died. The American crew feels the hit. They smell fuel for a terrifying second. Then, nothing. They keep flying. This difference becomes brutally clear over the next year. Japanese pilots continue to rely on a tactic that has always worked: short bursts aimed at fuel tanks. Against early Allied aircraft, it is devastating. Against American planes, it becomes unreliable. Meanwhile, American pilots begin noticing something else. They're getting hit and living. Lieutenant Edward Butch O'Hare, flying Wildcats from aircraft carriers in 1942, returns with wings riddled with holes, fuel tanks punctured, engines damaged, but no fire. Ground crews count the impacts and shake their heads. Any one of these hits would have killed a Japanese pilot instantly. The Americans start trusting their machines, and trust changes behavior. Japanese aircraft, by contrast, remain terrifyingly fragile. A single .50 caliber round from an American fighter can rupture an unprotected fuel tank. Gasoline sprays into the cockpit, one spark from the engine, and the Zero becomes an inferno. Pilots often have seconds, sometimes less. Veterans begin dying at an alarming rate, not because they lack skill, but because their aircraft offer no forgiveness. By late 1942, the laughter fades. Japanese after-action reports mention it indirectly. Enemy aircraft unusually resistant to fire. Multiple hits required. Targets failed to ignite. No one says the words aloud, but the realization is spreading. American planes are built to survive. Japanese planes are built to win fast or not at all. And in a war that is no longer short, that difference is fatal. As Sakai finally disengages, fuel running low, he looks back at the retreating American bombers. Scarred, smoking, but alive. For the first time since the war began, he feels something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Doubt. August 24th, 1942. Eastern Solomon Islands. Midday heat. Broken cloud layers at 18,000 feet. Petty Officer Tadashi Okamura tightens his grip on the control stick as his Zero shudders. A sharp thud echoes through the fuselage. Not an explosion, not a cannon hit. Something worse. A heavy machine gun round. Fuel sprays instantly. He smells it before he sees it. The cockpit fills with a sweet, choking vapor. His heart slams against his ribs. "Fire!" someone yells over the radio. A spark flashes near the engine cowling. The Zero ignites. There is no time for fear. No time for calculation. The flames crawl backward along the fuselage with terrifying speed, licking at the canopy. Okamura tears at his harness, shoves the canopy release, and throws himself into the slipstream. His parachute opens just in time. Below him, his aircraft detonates into fragments. A perfect, violent orange bloom against the blue Pacific. American pilots watch scenes like this repeatedly. They also watch something else. Their enemies are tufas. In dogfights over Guadalcanal, American Wildcats return riddled with holes. Fuel tanks holed clean through, sometimes leaking when they land. The ground crews patch them up, replace hoses, seal ruptures. Japanese planes rarely come back at all. The difference isn't skill. In the early months, Japanese aviators are still superior dogfighters. Many have logged hundreds of combat hours over China. They fly with calm precision, fluid coordination, lethal patience. But once hit, they burn, and American pilots begin to understand that survival itself is becoming a weapon. In squadron ready rooms, pilots compare damage reports. Fuel tank got hit. Didn't light. Same here. I thought I was dead. They stop joking about weight and speed. They start appreciating armor plates, bullet-resistant glass, self-sealing tanks. They begin pressing fights longer. They turn back toward enemies instead of diving away. They stay alive long enough to learn. The Japanese Navy understands the problem. but too late. Engineers in Tokyo have known about self-sealing tanks since before the war. German aircraft use them. British aircraft use them. But Japan's industrial reality makes adoption difficult. Rubber is scarce. Synthetic substitutes are inferior. Adding layers means redesigning airframes. Heavier, slower, less agile. Worse, it violates doctrine. Japanese naval aviation is built around the belief that decisive battles will be short and violent. The pilot's duty is to destroy the enemy, not survive extended campaigns. Survivability is seen as weakness. So the Zero keeps flying with unprotected tanks, and the pilots keep dying. By 1943, American aircraft dominate the skies not because they are invincible, but because they are durable. The F-6F Hellcat enters combat with thick armor, massive fuel protection, and self-sealing tanks refined through brutal trial. Japanese pilots hit it repeatedly and watch it stay airborne. They begin changing tactics. They aim for the cockpit. They try head-on attacks. They expend more ammunition for fewer kills. Fatigue rises. Confidence erodes. Veteran Japanese pilots notice the shift first. In after-action briefings, survivors speak quietly. The enemy does not burn. They return fire, even after being hit. They come back again. Each American pilot who survives a mission becomes more dangerous on the next one. He learns enemy habits. He recognizes formations. He refines instinct. Each Japanese pilot lost is irreplaceable. Training pipelines collapse under pressure. New pilots arrive with fewer hours, less experience, less confidence, and they fly aircraft that still burn like paper lanterns. Saburo Sakai survives, barely. He takes a bullet through the head in August 1942 and lives, blind in one eye, bleeding into his flight suit, his Zero barely holding together. Even then, it is not fuel fire that kills him, because he avoids it by luck alone. He later writes of the terror of knowing that any hit could be fatal. Not disabling, fatal. By mid-1944, American pilots rarely even notice fuel hits unless gauges start dropping. Japanese pilots notice instantly. Fire teaches quickly, and it teaches cruelly. The laughter that once followed American over-engineered planes has vanished. In its place is a grim understanding. The enemy expects to be hit, and has planned for it. The Japanese have not, and in the skies over the Pacific, that difference is no longer theoretical. It is counted in bodies. June 19th, 1904. The Philippine Sea. Morning light glinting off endless water. Lieutenant David McCampbell pushes his Hellcat into a climbing turn, the engine roaring with raw power. Tracers streak past his canopy, close enough to make him flinch, and something slams hard into his left wing. He glances down. Fuel pressure drops for a heartbeat, then stabilizes. No fire, no smoke, just vibration. McCampbell exhales and keeps climbing. Below him, a Japanese Zero tries to follow. Lighter, tighter in the turn, but already bleeding energy. McCampbell rolls, drops his nose, and fires. The .50 caliber rounds hammer home. The Zero ignites instantly. Another veteran gone. This battle will later be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But in the cockpit, there is nothing casual about it. It is survival distilled into seconds. American pilots take hits and stay in the fight. Japanese pilots take hits and vanish in flame. By now, the outcome feels inevitable. The self-sealing fuel tank has done more than stop fires. It has changed time. Time to react. Time to maneuver. Time to return fire. Time to survive long enough to learn. American pilots in 1944 are not the same men they were in 1942. Many are veterans with dozens of engagements behind them. They recognize Zero attack patterns instantly. They know when to dive, when to extend, when to climb. And they know, deep down, that a single hit does not mean death. That confidence is invisible on paper. In combat, it is everything. Japanese command sees the numbers and cannot reconcile them. Aircraft losses are staggering. Pilot losses are catastrophic. Engineers scramble to retrofit later designs like the Kai-84 Hayate with fuel protection, armor, anything to slow the bleeding. But the solutions arrive late, in limited numbers, with material shortages and rushed production. Too few planes, too few trained pilots, too much fire. American aircraft carriers cycle squadrons with mechanical precision. Planes land damaged, leaking, torn, and fly again days later. Japanese carriers sink, airfields empty. The attrition curve becomes vertical. Every American pilot who lands with fuel leaking but no fire becomes a multiplier, a teacher to new pilots, a leader in the air, a memory bank of combat lessons. Every Japanese pilot lost takes his experience into the sea. By late 1944, Japanese pilots no longer laugh. They warn new flyers. If you are hit, jump immediately. Do not hesitate. Fire spreads faster than fear. Some even attempt to fly with fuel throttled low to reduce ignition risk. Others remove unnecessary equipment in desperate attempts to offset added armor. Nothing changes the core reality. Their aircraft were never designed to be wounded. McCampbell lands his Hellcat after the battle with holes through both wings and shrapnel scars along the fuselage. The deck crew counts them in silence. "Tanks sealed," one of them mutters. "Lucky." McCampbell shakes his head. "Not luck," he says. "Design." The Pacific sky grows quieter as the months pass, not because the war is ending, but because one side can no longer replace what it loses. Self-sealing fuel tanks were never meant to win the war alone, but they ensured that the men flying American aircraft lived long enough to finish it. October 25, 1944. Later Gulf, smoke columns clawing upward from burning ships. Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka feels the heat before he sees the fire. His Zero shudders violently as a burst from an American Hellcat rips through the wing root. Fuel sprays outward in a glittering mist. For a split second, nothing happens. Then the engine coughs. The flame blooms instantly, bright, hungry, unstoppable. Tanaka doesn't scream. He's been trained for this. He knows what comes next. He reaches for the canopy latch. It's already too late. By later, the truth is no longer debated inside the Imperial Japanese Navy. Fire is killing them. Not tactics, not courage, not even numbers alone. Fire. American pilots hit Japanese aircraft and expect flame. And they get it. Japanese pilots hit American aircraft and hope for flame, and usually do not. The psychological weight of this imbalance is crushing. Japanese pilots begin every engagement knowing that one mistake means death. American pilots begin knowing that one mistake might still leave them alive. That difference changes how men fly. American pilots push attacks deeper. They stay in firing range longer. They accept hits if it means finishing a kill. They trust their aircraft to absorb damage and bring them home. Japanese pilots become cautious or desperate. Some break off attacks early. Others charge headlong, knowing survival is unlikely. Kamikaze doctrine emerges not from fanaticism alone, but from a brutal arithmetic. If survival is improbable anyway, then impact becomes the mission. Aircraft that cannot survive damage are repurposed into weapons that do not need to. Behind the scenes, Japanese engineers fight a losing battle. They test self-sealing concepts. They add partial protection where rubber can be spared. They thicken fuel lines. They redesign tank placement. But by 1944, Japan is strangled by blockade. Rubber shortages are severe. Factories are bombed. Skilled labor is gone. American industry, by contrast, is perfecting survivability at scale. Every new aircraft generation improves sealing, compartmentalization, fire suppression. Fuel tanks are isolated, lines rerouted. Damage control becomes systemic. What began as a defensive feature becomes a doctrine. American pilots notice something chilling. Enemy aircraft burn so predictably that they stop tracking them after a hit. A brief flash, a falling shape, a splash, no parachutes. They don't cheer. They just keep flying. Saburo Sakai, one of the few Japanese aces to survive the war, will later reflect on this imbalance with painful clarity. He does not blame the pilots. He does not even blame the aircraft designers. He blames assumptions. The assumption that wars are short, that pilots are expendable, that protection is weakness. Against an enemy that planned to survive, those assumptions are lethal. By 1945, American pilots fly with a quiet certainty. They know their aircraft are not invincible, but they also know they are not disposable. When hit, they fight the fire, and often win. When Japanese pilots are hit, the fire fights them, and always wins. August 15, 1945, Japan. Radio static filling the airwaves. The war ends not with a dogfight, but with a voice. Pilots listen in silence as surrender is announced. Some stare at their aircraft, machines that have carried them through years of survival. Others think of those who never landed. American pilots walk away from planes scarred but intact. Japanese airfields are quiet, too quiet. In post-war analysis, historians tally aircraft types, pilot hours, training pipelines, tactics. But one lesson cuts through all of it. Survivability compounds. A pilot who lives learns. A pilot who learns kills more effectively. A pilot who kills effectively protects others. Self-sealing fuel tanks did not make American pilots braver. They made bravery sustainable. Japanese pilots once laughed at the idea. Too heavy, too cautious, too American. They stopped laughing when fires stopped spreading on the other side. By the time they understood why, there were too few left to change anything. The Pacific skies are empty now, but the lesson remains, written in aluminum, rubber, and fire. Wars are not won only by who strikes hardest. They are won by who survives long enough to strike again.